Let me just move on to talk about Panorama tonight. It's going to look at what's been called the worst treatment disaster in the history of the NHS. More than 2,000 people died and thousands more were infected with HIV and hepatitis C after being treated with contaminated blood products. All the victims were infected over 25 years ago, but even now, new cases are still being diagnosed. Michelle Tolley lives near Dereham and she features in the documentary. She was infected with hepatitis C when she was given a blood transfusion in the late 1980s, but only diagnosed last year. She says it's a scandal that has ruined thousands of lives.
It doesn't just affect one person, it's the families concerned, the wives, the husbands, the children, the sisters, the work friends, the workplace. It's just ongoing, and there are so many people affected by this.
I just want to grab a word with Sue Threakall, who's from the group Tainted Blood, which campaigns for victims and their families. Sue, very good morning to you. How did these... Sue's not there, forgive me. We're going to try and get Sue on the line so we can speak to Sue about this, but we'll also be discussing this with Michelle Tolley at some point in the programme this morning, who, of course, is who has had this very issue, who has received tainted blood. I believe that Sue Threakall's on the line now. Very good morning, Sue. Forgive us for the technical blip there.
Good morning. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Forgive me.
Oh, that's good.
How did these contaminated blood products end up in the system?
Well, essentially, our group, Tainted Blood, campaigns on behalf of those who have received blood products, not whole blood. Basically, there were two ways. With the blood products, up until about the late 1970s, early 1980s, there were various treatments which were okay. They didn't work brilliantly, but to some extent they did help. And those were products such as cryoprecipitate, which was frozen whole plasma, if you like, which was time-consuming to administer. People had to go to hospital for it and so on. In the early 80s, a new product came onto the market, and that was made out of pooled plasma. In other words, they took the donations of tens of thousands of people, up to 60,000 in some cases, and pulled it together and then extracted the protein that was missing that enabled haemophiliac's blood to clot. So what it meant was that if only one person out of that 60,000 was carrying a virus such as hepatitis C or HIV, it would infect the whole batch. Gosh. Now, there were warnings from as early as 1974 onwards, when the World Health Organization warned Britain not to import plasma from places such as the United States, which had a high risk, or a high prevalence rather, of hepatitis. Again, in 1975, the World Health Organization issued a resolution which stated that every country should be able to supply its own blood and blood products in order to supply its clinical needs. For whatever reasons, and I suspect it was purely for financial reasons, the UK government decided to completely ignore the World Health Organization warnings, which is something I've never been able to completely get my head around, with the result that 5,000 haemophiliacs became infected with hepatitis C because the product was 100% contagious. Right. And out of those 5,000, over 1,000, about 1,200 also, on top of the hepatitis C, contracted HIV.
Right, OK. Now, your husband was a haemophiliac who was given contaminated blood. Just tell me what happened to him.
He was doing okay. I mean, when I married him, he'd already got 2 sons from previous marriage. He'd got a good job. This is despite the fact that as a child, no normal, and I put that in inverted commas, school would allow him to go in because of his haemophilia, and he had to be educated in a special school. When he left school, he did his qualifications at night school, got quite a good job, ironically, in the civil service. We married in 1981. We had our own son in 1983. We were doing fine. We had a nice house, lovely family, prospects of, just a normal, nice life. We both worked very hard. In 1985, he was called into the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham, where he had his treatment, to be told that a previous test, about 18 months before, revealed that he was positive to HIV. Now, during that 18 months, I could have contracted it. I was fortunate that I didn't. A lot of women did. A lot of the partners of haemophiliacs actually contracted it because of the delay in informing people that they'd actually got the virus.
How does that make you feel?
Well, even now, it makes me feel angry. It makes me feel very sad, especially for those people. And this might sound ironic, but for those people who are still living with it. There's nothing we can do to bring my husband back or any of the other 2,000 that have died so far. But the people that are still alive today, the people that have survived this, surely to goodness, they shouldn't have been turned into professional campaigners by a government that has done absolutely everything within its power to avoid facing up to the truth.
But hang on, by a government or by successive governments?
By successive governments, you're right.
Yeah, so what do you make then of the former Health Secretary, Andy Burnham, telling the House of Commons that he's got evidence of a large-scale cover-up and he's going to go to the police if there isn't a full inquiry? Now, I understand that's encouraging, but it must also be quite frustrating that here's a guy who also had the Health Secretary brief for a while and could have done something about it, but hasn't done anything about it until he's a backbench MP.
Yeah, do you know what I think the problem is? I think the problem is that it doesn't matter how willing they are, how much they know, and we've known this stuff for, well, a lot of it for well over 10 years, and we've been able to prove it, we've been able to evidence it. We never, ever say anything we can't provide evidence for. But when they're in power, they are completely dictated to by the Department of Health civil servants, who are the sort of faceless, nameless background to all of this, and they transcend successive governments. And so you get a new minister or a junior minister coming into office, and in fairness to them, they probably don't know a great deal about what they're talking about for the first few months. So, excuse me, they rely very heavily on the briefs that are given to them. And these briefs, in my opinion, are designed to completely deflect any blame from the Department of Health in particular and the government in general.
Well, but David Cameron, in his last appearance as the Prime Minister in the Commons, apologised, and the government has increased the payments to victims. It said it doubled spending on support payments. Is it doing enough?
No, it isn't, and they are very keen at whatever we put to them, whatever questions are asked, whatever questions ministers ask and MPs ask, are deflected every single time by the government telling us what they've done, as if it's kind of Lady Bountiful in Westminster, instead of facing up to the fact that what they've done is actually not enough. And in the last review, which is the one they're talking about when they say they've doubled the spend, what they have effectively done is taken money from those who are worst affected, i.e. the co-infected, in order to give it to the people who, and again, I'll say this in inverted commas, have only got Hep C. And I'm not detracting at all from the people who just have Hep C. As Michelle Tolley said a few minutes ago, it can destroy lives. It's an horrendous, horrendous infection. But what they've done is to preset the budget. They have a pot of money, which they are then trying to split and move around between various groups that they have created, incidentally. And it just simply hasn't worked. Okay. So to continually stand there in Parliament and answer pretty well any question that is given to them on any aspect of this subject by saying, oh, yes, but we've done such and such. It's not answering the question. It's not addressing the issue.
OK, all right. Well, forgive me, Sue, for leaving it there. Fascinating to hear what you've got to say. Thank you for sharing the story of your husband as well.
That's no problem.
I really appreciate that.
OK, thank you. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. No, that's Sue Threakall, who's from the campaign group Tainted Blood. The Department of Health said it couldn't comment because we're in an election period. But it has previously ruled out a further inquiry. And it said that it's doubled the amount it's spending on support payments to people affected by contaminated blood. Later on, we're going to be joined by Michelle Tolley from Sparham near Dereham. She features on Panorama tonight, and we've been following her story here on Nick Conrad at Breakfast. Here's Kaylee.
A woman from Norfolk will feature in a BBC investigation tonight looking at the contaminated blood scandal. Michelle Tolley from Dereham was one of thousands of people infected with hepatitis C after being treated with contaminated blood products.
Michelle Tolley from Sparham near Dereham contracted hepatitis C when she was given tainted blood back in 1991. She was only diagnosed as being infected around 18 months ago. We've been following her story since then, and she's going to appear on Panorama tonight. She's in my studio now. Good morning.
Good morning, Nick.
Lovely to see you again. OK, let's talk about where we're at now. So this documentary is going out tonight. This is going to be a big national spotlight on this. You have become one of the most prominent campaigners in the country on this issue. So I guess you are delighted that BBC One Television, the biggest network in the country, will be featuring your story.
Oh, I mean, it's absolutely fantastic for us. And that's for all contaminated victims. I can't tell you the kind of journey that I know that I've been on during the last 18 months, let alone for the people that have known about it since the 70s, etc. It'll be interesting to see the government's response. I don't think that they can continue to ignore us. We need some form of inquiry. We need closure. I need closure, and I want some answers, basically.
Do you think you're any closer to getting those answers?
I'd like to think so. It's come at a funny time with the government and the new election. So we'll just have to wait and see. I will never stop fighting. I will never stop campaigning, and I will never stop talking.
How angry do you feel about this?
I'm absolutely livid. I'm furious. I feel like my life's been stolen. I can't get back those last 30 years that I've suffered. Even though I've had treatment, I'm in what you might call a remission stage at the moment. I won't know now until November that I'm completely clear, but I'm still under the hospital. I'm still been sent to see further specialists because I've still got ongoing health issues.
And if people don't know much about hepatitis C, it is a very, very nasty condition.
It is absolutely disgusting. It manifests itself after years and years and years, and the damage that it causes, if it doesn't kill you first, is horrendous.
For example, your liver is not in a particularly good state, but is improving.
It's improving. I mean, the hospital, the Norfolk and Norwich, keep a close eye. Every 6 months you have a scan just to keep a check that no nodules, etc. Have appeared. But it's just the everyday thing of the chronic tiredness. I've now got aching joints, which are unbelievable. I cry in bed of a night where it's so painful and sore. So in terms of this time last year, I feel worse now than before I started the medication.
Andy Burnham, now the mayor in Manchester, former health secretary, says he has evidence of criminality. And he says if there's not a full Hillsborough-style inquest, he's going to go to the police. What do you make of that? Well,
my message to Andy Burnham is if you have incriminating evidence, then why wait? Take it to the police. You know that these are people's lives that have been lost, experimented on apparently.
What do you feel about There's two ways of looking at this. You know, on the one hand, you could say, well, it's great that somebody like Andy Burnham, high-profile politician, appears to be on your side. There is criticism of Mr. Burnham, and some campaigners saying, well, he was the health secretary for a period of time. He must have been aware of this because it's been going around for quite some time. You've been very clear you think it's successive governments who've let you down. Yet only now is he willing to do something about it or take that evidence forward to the police. But he's still not forthcoming with that evidence. He wants a Hillsborough-style inquest. On the one hand, you could say, well, surely that's great because a Hillsborough-style inquest is going to blow this out into the public. On the other hand, you might say, well, the difficulty here is that if he has incriminating evidence, especially now in his position as being a mayor of a major city in Britain, that's the same as saying I have evidence that should be supplied to the police, but I'm holding it back, which of course is not the message that you tend to push out.
No, exactly. He has a duty and a responsibility, you know, for us contaminated victims. If he's got the evidence, please, Andy Burnham, I urge you to take it to the police. We want an inquiry. You know, people's names need to be told. Who agreed for this contaminated blood, why we were infected, why I had 2 lots of blood transfusions. The first one was in 1987, the second one was in February 1991, and then it was April 1991 that they started screening the bloods. So they must have been aware that there was a problem. I want to know why I was given that blood without being asked first. Permission, advice, guidance. It's absolutely destroyed my life and I am absolutely livid.
What would you say to somebody who would claim this is just another case of people coming forward and saying we want to highlight our very legitimate condition, but also in the background there must be the temptation of compensation. And there are some who are sceptical, who say that a lot of the drive behind campaigns like this is the pursuit of money.
The thing is, Nick, no amount of money can actually buy back what's been lost. You can't replace a life, a death, the ongoing feelings for families, wives, husbands, children, friends, work colleagues. It has a devastating knock-on effect.
Do you find that assumption that some might come to in itself quite offensive?
I mean, I can only say this is, which is my opinion, you know, and if I have offended anyone in the past, I completely apologise. I can only say it as I see it. I've had to soak up an awful lot in the last 18 months. I didn't have a clue. So all the research I've done has been off my own back. I decided to become vocal. That's why I wrote to you initially, because for me, I wanted to share the awareness, raise people's their awareness, and that if anyone's out there, to go and get tested.
What I really meant by that, though, was that some people get very frustrated and upset when, in the press, it can be you can be bandied into chasing compensation, the compensation culture of this country, when actually what you have consistently asked for is answers.
Yes.
We've never actually once talked about compensation. No. We've spoken about answers. We've always spoken about answers. The interesting thing, though, is the majority of listeners listening in this morning, and, you know, the government have accepted this, the Prime Minister has apologised for what's happened to you, they would say that you are one of the cases that definitely deserves compensation. But how do you compensate? What monetary figure can you put on your life?
There isn't. It's priceless. A person's life is priceless. Absolutely priceless. You can't...
If you were to accept money or to be offered money, and we're talking about tainted blood here, would it almost feel like tainted money to receive it?
Yes. Yeah, I believe it was. I mean, we're all entitled to some kind of quality of life, however long that them lives may be left. Yeah, we deserve that. It's not my fault that I can't now go to work. Absolutely. For us to be comfortable and to live our lives, and not have to worry about how we're going to pay for our funerals, living our loved ones with the expenses. I can't ever see there being compensation. There should be compensation for whole blood victims and for the Haemophiliac Society. It's absolutely disgraceful.
Surely one of your strongest cards as well for calling for a wide inquiry is that if we don't have a Hillsborough-style inquest, then we can't identify what went wrong officially. And if we can't officially identify what went wrong, we can't learn those lessons.
Exactly. I think it's a whole world problem. You know, it's not just in the UK; it's everywhere. However, for when people are only finding out kind of a year or so ago, then there's other people since me that have found out. I mean, you think back in the 90s, I went to a GP, not my GP I'm with now. This was in Essex. And talked about the issue because the adverts was on the TV, and I got sent away without being tested. So I'm let down instantly there, and that's by your own, you know, doctor's surgery, which is, I wouldn't, you know, that could have been captured. I wouldn't have ended up with cirrhosis. I would have had my life back. You know, it's, I can't I'm so angry, I can't put into words.
The interesting thing about your story, and we've worked together for quite some time in terms of telling your story and bringing it to the attention of the audience. I remember the first contact that we had when you initially approached me, and we talked about making this story public. Since then, you've been on many national radio and television programmes, and you've featured in many national newspapers and have become quite high profile as a campaigner in this area. In fact, in just a few minutes' time, in about half an hour's time, I understand, or an hour's time, forgive me, I understand that you're going to go head-to-head with Mr Burnham on BBC Two. What is that like for you to be an ordinary person with a very, very difficult condition, but thrust into the spotlight to tell the nation time and time again what you're going through in this, what can at times and must feel like a hopeless pursuit to try and get the condition and what you went through and the process that you've come to now recognised?
Sorry, can you just repeat that again, Nick? I've gone into brain fog.
That's all right.
Sorry, yeah.
Fine. What is it like to be in this position now where you are constantly in radio studios, in front of television cameras, trying to get recognition, at the same time trying to beat and battle this very, very debilitating condition. And I've known you through the whole of this process. What's it like now to be in a position where you're going against a major politician on BBC Two, and some might look at it saying, well, on top of the condition you've got, that must be exhausting in itself.
Oh, it is absolutely exhausting. I mean, I'm absolutely shattered. However, Panorama has given us the opportunity to get that story out there, and I will take and grasp any opportunity to speak about our cause.
Michelle, great to see you as always.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you to your listeners.
Wish you all the best. Michelle Tolley, who lives near Dereham, has got hepatitis C from a contaminated blood transfusion. You can see Michelle on Panorama on BBC One at 9 o'clock tonight. The Department of Health said it couldn't comment because we're in an election period, but it has previously ruled out a further inquiry, and it said that it's doubled the amount it's spending on support payments to people affected by contaminated blood. 8:30.